Alrighty, so I got this Game Boy Pocket here. This is one that I've had for a few years. At one point, it ended up with a broken screen, and so I just kept it around for this exact purpose. I knew that eventually one day I would want to have a Game Boy Pocket with an IPS display in it. So today is that day. We are going to fix this guy up. I've mentioned before how I typically order these kind of parts from like Handheld Legend or retro modding, and that I don't typically order them from AliExpress because I'm sort of impatient. I don't like waiting like 3 weeks to get them. You know, when I want to do a mod, I want the parts as soon as possible. This time I thought I would try my patience, and I figured, you know what, we'll try ordering from Funny Playing directly on AliExpress. So this is the first time I've ordered directly from, this is the official Funny Playing store on AliExpress. And I gotta say, I like the way they do things. They just sell most of these as a straight up kit where you're gonna get everything that you need. You're gonna get the shell, you're gonna get new buttons, you're gonna get the right screen protector that you need. You're gonna get any sort of mounting brackets if you need alignment brackets. Um, Everything that you need in one kit, and you know everything's gonna work. And that kit ends up being roughly the same price that just the screen itself would cost if I bought it from Handheld Legend or Retro Modding. So basically getting, a free shell, free screen cover, free buttons, and, any alignment brackets or anything like that that you may need. And then on top of that, it's free shipping. So it does end up being a fair bit cheaper. Yeah, look at that. This is a lemon yellow. Is it called lemon yellow? I already forget. I think it's the lemon yellow colored shell. And the reason I wanted this shell is because in Japan, they released a special edition version of the Game Boy Light. And I think it was a Toys R Us exclusive model. So the Game Boy Light was already exclusive to Japan. And then in Japan, you had this Toys R Us exclusive version of the Game Boy Light. And it came in this, like, I call it piss yellow. That doesn't sound very appealing. I get it, but I like it. I've always liked this version of the Game Boy Light, so much to the point that at one point I thought maybe I'll buy this shell for my Game Boy Light. I've got that gold Game Boy Light that the paint's kind of worn out in a few spots on, and I thought maybe one day I'll buy the replacement shell for the Game Boy Light to make it look like this one. But then, that shell alone is $50 US. It's like very expensive. I can only imagine there's only one company making a very small amount of replacement shells for the Game Boy Light. And so here we are. We're going to do up a Game Boy Pocket that's kind of going to look like that Game Boy Light. I think this is pretty close. It might not be exact, and it's hard to tell. Different lighting conditions, it looks different. And of course, we don't have the internals in there. And I think, the motherboard on a Game Boy Light looks different. So it's not going to look exactly the same, but I think it's pretty close. This was all a kit. So this all came together, and it came with a tempered glass screen protector. And you know what? As soon as you pick this up, you can tell it's glass. This thing weighs like 3 times more than the stock plastic ones. It just feels quality. But more importantly, the cutout is a little bit bigger because these IPS screens, the current ones for the Game Boy Pocket, are about 11% bigger than a stock screen. So you've got to, of course, have the right screen protector. That's one thing when you're buying this stuff all separately. You've got to make sure that the screen you're buying is going to fit in the shell that you're buying, and that you're buying the right alignment brackets for the screen that you're buying, and that you're buying the right screen protector, because again, sometimes these have different size bezels for different screens. And again, that's one thing I kind of like about this way is you don't have as many color combinations as if you bought it all separately, but I mean, you still can buy it all separately if you want to. I think just for most people, to be able to buy the kit, it's cheaper and you get it all together and it's all going to work. This is all Funny Playing official stuff. And we've got the buttons here and actually the membranes, which if you look at the ad, they don't even show the membranes. Like, I wasn't even expecting it to come with the membranes. I was just expecting to use the stock membranes. So for me, it doesn't really matter. The stock membranes are probably fine, but you know, if yours are worn out, it's nice to know you get the membranes with it. They didn't really show that or make that clear. And then this is what the screen comes in. I mean, look at that. It looks like a giant Game Boy cartridge. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? And you get funny playing on there. And open that up, and there you can see there's the screen, but they've actually already got the ribbon attached to the screen and sort of aligned, and I think it's taped down even exactly in the way that you want it to be. So that's a nice little touch. Every other time I bought the screens from Handheld Legend or Retro Modding, the screen was separate from the ribbon, and you kind of had to do that yourself. You know, you had to connect the screen to the ribbon, which is pretty finicky. So I mean, why not make it as easy as possible? This is a pretty easy installation. There's only one wire that you have to solder, and that's from the power switch to the ribbon. So as far as these mods go, this is one of the easier ones to do. And it looks like they give you, well, a little gasket to stick the screen in the shell, and an extra touch sensor, although the ribbon already has a touch sensor on it. So I'm not really 100% sure what the extra one's for. It might be if you want the touch sensor, because by default the touch sensor is going to be at the top. Maybe if you want it to be on the side or something, but I don't think we need to use that. So again, we'll see. I'm going to test the screen first before I go sticking it in this shell. Again, that's pretty much always recommended when you're doing these mods. They want you to do it that way. Actually, it says right here, please test the kit before installation. They don't want you to stick it in, you know, before you've tested the screen. From what I've heard in comments, they seem to be pretty good. Even on AliExpress, they seem to be pretty good with replacing the screen if you get a bad screen. Again, this is AliExpress, but it is like the official Funny Playing store. So we're just gonna open the Game Boy. I'm gonna assume that's Tri-Wing. It's been a while since I opened a Pocket. Of course, it's Tri-Wing. And yeah, there's just 6 screws holding the Game Boy Pocket together. We're done with the Tri-Wing. And now we go to the Phillips. On the inside of a Game Boy Pocket, there's only 3 screws holding the motherboard in, which compared to a DMG is almost comical. We are going to loosen up the little, what do they call these? Bailing locks? What do you call these things? I don't know. We're gonna loosen the locking mechanism on the harness for the screen, the LCD screen here, and pop that out. And there's the motherboard out. And I guess we don't need anything from this, do we? So here's the screen. And like I said, they've kind of sort of half assembled this already in a way. The way they've got the driver board already connected to the screen here. And again, that's usually kind of finicky, so it's nice that they've done that. And yeah, they've taped this down, and this is just aligned like perfectly. So here's your touch sensor right here. That's going to end up, again, right at the top of the system. And the harness is right here. I really like the way this is kind of already pre-assembled. I've never bought a screen before where the driver board was already attached to the screen. It's such a simple thing for them to do. You know, it only takes a minute, but it does make the installation a lot easier. It makes it seem a lot easier too, especially if you've never done one before. Sometimes it's a little confusing as how the screen goes in. And again, sometimes that little connection there can be a little finicky. So honestly, anything they can do to make that easier, why not? I like this. Again, I like the fact the whole kit is just sold as a kit, and you get everything that you need, and you know it's going to work together. It's all Funny Playing parts. So yeah, that's going to go in the back shell like that. But like I said, we do have to solder the power. So there's a little spot on here on the ribbon There's literally just one, yeah, there's literally just one contact here that says power. And that's got to get soldered to one of these connections on the power switch. Yeah, I guess I'll get the soldering iron out and we'll get that soldered on. We've got to do that anyways. Yeah, I'll be back in a minute. God damn it. Well, this is supposed to be the spot where I show you that I'm testing the screen and that it's working, but it's not working. The first time I installed it, turned it on to test it, just got a black screen, but the backlight was on. The backlight was on and the Game Boy was running. The game was running. You could hear the game running on the speaker, but again, just a black image on the screen. And so upon further inspection of the LCD ribbon, I discovered that there was a rip in it. This rip is going through at least 2 traces. This is very disappointing. I really don't believe this is anything I caused. Anyways, I messaged AliExpress, or the Funny Playing store on AliExpress, and showed them some pictures and just said, like, yeah, basically just was getting a black screen, and I noticed there was this cut on the ribbon. And they got back to me pretty quickly saying they were going to send me another screen. So, man, it's not the end of the world, but I got to wait another 3 weeks now. Alrighty, so the new screen has arrived. This is the old one here. And like I showed, that one has a rip in the ribbon there. So I got the new one hooked up. The power, like a little power wire that runs from the ribbon to the power switch. I know that works because, again, the backlight on this one came on. So the fact the backlight came on means that it was getting power. It just wasn't getting its full, video signal or whatever it needed through those few traces that were clearly ripped through there. So we're going to throw that in the back half of the shell here with a couple of batteries, just so that we can test it, and hopefully it works. If we turn it on, whew, excellent. What a relief. I want to get this thing put back together as soon as possible. Like I've said in other Game Boy builds before, if you don't have to stick the screen in permanently, don't do it. If you ever have to remove the screen, clean it, you might get dust in between the screen protector and the screen, or you just want to change the shell, or for any reason you ever need to take that screen out, if it's stuck in there, it can break pretty easily. So I'm going to try it without. We'll see how that looks. All right, so the screen fits in there perfectly. Again, this screen was meant for this shell, so there's no alignment bracket needed. It literally has the cutout for the screen, and the screen just fits in there perfectly. Obviously, this is going to fold over, and we'll screw that down. Alrighty, so there's the screws. We'll screw that down in there. Don't forget the power switch. And the touch sensor, like I said, is just going to sit up in the top there. There is some sticky tape that you can unpeel, but I don't think I'm going to do that. If I ever need to remove this, it'll be nice if that's not taped in. And I think just by the way it sits in there, it's going to be fine. But again, we'll see. If I have to end up taping the screen down or taping that down, I'll go ahead and do that. But I think it's going to be fine just sitting in there. Just a small heads up with the screws. I'm using the screws that the new shell came with. I wasn't sure if they would all be the same. Sometimes they're all the same. Sometimes with the aftermarket shells, they don't bother with the tri-wing. They just use the Phillips or the JIS for everything. But actually here, it's pretty obvious. 3 of them are shorter, and the shorter ones are Phillips, but the longer ones are actually tri-wing. So they're very similar to the stock screws. Just wanted to point that out. So I'm going to mention it before I forget if I didn't mention it already, but when you're putting the motherboard in, there's normally 3 screws holding it in. You're only going to use the outer 2. You're going to skip the one that you can actually see right here. The reason is this battery compartment has been modified. Instead of being scooped with a little divider in the middle to fit the 2 batteries, it's been sort of squared out, flat-bottomed, And that's so that you can fit the like lithium ion packs, you know, rechargeable battery modifications in here. Usually you would have to grind that all out, but this shell's been designed that it's going to fit the lithium ion packs with the little rechargeable recharging circuit, but still obviously fits double A's. The double A's do fit a little bit. Geez, if I can do this with one hand. The double A's do fit a little bit looser because of that. Like, they don't have the defined, you can see how there's some wiggle room there. They don't have the defined sort of spacer in between them. For the most part, that shouldn't be an issue. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And throw a game in there. And turn it on. Oh, look at that. Oh, that is awesome. Let's peel this off. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at that. Now, of course, on this screen, we've got a lot of different color options we can go through with the touch sensor here. Now, there's a lot of color options, so I'll have to go through them all and see which one I like the best. But I don't know, at a quick glance, which one goes good with the with the green. Oh, well, that looks pretty cool with the green. Kind of like a light brown. Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. Let me turn my light on here. Oh my God, look at that, guys. I love the size of the screen. Like I said, it's about 11% larger than a stock pocket screen. So yeah, that just looks amazing. And check this out. The contrast wheel is the brightness knob now. How freaking cool is that? That is awesome. I didn't stick the touch sensor in, and as you can see, it kind of fell down in there. So you may want to stick that in there. The funny thing is, though, is it still works perfectly. Oh, the black and white looks pretty good there. There's like 36 different color combinations, but I'm going to get to one that's really obvious where it changes. There was one that was negative. We'll get over to that one. Yeah, there we go. Now, if you hold, it goes back. You see? We go forward, and we can hold, and we can go back. I'm actually surprised how well that touch sensor is working, considering it's actually kind of fallen off. It's not directly like flat with the top of the system. But yeah, so you can go forward and back pretty easily. Now, if you hold it even longer, we get pixel modes. This phone doesn't have macro. That's as close as I can get on this phone. Although, actually, let's punch in with the optical, with the 2x digital zoom. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna hold that again. Now, it did go back, I think. There we go. Okay, yeah, so there's the pic. Oh my God. Look at those pixels, man. If you like the gap between the pixels for a more authentic look, wow, boy, this gives it to you. And again, there's just so many different color options, and they're all sort of not like over contrasty or over vibrant. They're all like washed out slightly, and I mean that in a good way. And I mean that in a way that it works well with the Game Boys. It's only got really 3 shades of gray. You could call it 4, but the 4th one's really just the blank screen, if you know what I mean. the 3 levels of darkness that you have on the pixels to make the 3 shades of gray, in conjunction with just the emptiness of having what would be the background. The shades work good with that, is what I'm trying to say. It's like, oh my god, like the sepia tone one. That looks really, really cool on there. And then when you get up close and you see the pixel gap, it's very, very authentic looking. This is just awesome. I ended up taking it apart again to stick the sensor in there, and actually ended up taking the gasket out completely. There was a super fine hair. It looked like an eyelash. A really, really fine hair that was up in this top left corner. And it was all, I could not get it out. I was trying to get it out, couldn't get it out. Ended up being stuck to the tape to hold the screen in. So yeah, right now there's no tape holding the screen in, but as you can see, the centering and evenness of that screen is pretty good, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I really don't think it's an issue. The shell, fitment on this shell is really good. Yeah, the buttons feel great. The membranes feel great. Everything on there feels great. Again, the touch sensor up on the top there, we can change color in pixel mode, but if you don't like that, touch the sensor, hold it down. It's going to go back because there we go. So if you just want the most contrasty look you can get, you're not going to want the pixel gap in there. And then again, I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hold it. It's going to go back one because you're holding it for 3 seconds, but you hold it a little bit longer, and boom, got your pixel mode on there. So if you want the pixel gap or not, the option's yours. But yeah, the screen, as far as the quality of the screen, again, zoomed out a bit. If we do this, turn that off, you're going to notice you get a little more contrast, obviously, when you don't have the gap in between the pixels because there's just more black area. Yeah, again, screen is lined up perfectly. Shell came together perfectly. Again, at this point, we don't have any sort of gasket or sticky tape, double-sided tape holding the screen in there. It's just in there with fitment. But again, the shell has like a pretty good sort of pre-cut area for the screen to fit in. So yeah, alignment is pretty much perfect there, as you can see. One major complaint is not really so much a complaint with the mod in general as it is more so with the Game Boy Pocket in general. And that is, as I've mentioned before, the Game Boy Pocket's voltage regulator. First of all, it takes 2 AAAs instead of 2 AAAs or 4 AAAs like the DMG. There's not a lot of capacity there, but the voltage regulator also isn't super efficient, and it doesn't have a lot of voltage overhead. It can't handle drops in voltage very well. And so the Game Boy Pocket in general can be a little bit iffy when you start doing mods. Some people will change the voltage regulator. With regular game cartridges, it's probably not going to be an issue. But with flash carts use a little more power. There's more chips in there. There's a little microprocessor in there. It needs power to flash the EEPROMs. It needs a little more power to do that. Although, that said, we're running off of alkalines, the full 1.5 volt alkaline batteries. And another thing I wanted to test was if you're running it off of 1.2 volt nickel metal hydride or whatever, analoop, rechargeable analoops in this case. So now we're really going to be pushing that poor little voltage regulator, because where it was getting 3 volts, now it's only getting 2.4, I guess. So again, hopefully with real cartridges, Not an issue. Actually, it seems to be fine. Even the power light's lit up as pretty much as well, I think, as it was before. So yeah, actually, that is fine. But let me show you, for example, what happens when we put an EverDrive in there. The EverDrive is a little bit of a tight fit. I've noticed that in the Pocket in general, actually. Even my stock Game Boy Pockets, it's a little bit of a tighter fit. Let's turn that on and just watch what happens. Nintendo goes to boot up the EverDrive, and it just reset. Goes to boot up the EverDrive, and actually, so it got in on the second try. Let's try loading up. Let's load Battletoads just to see what happens. Huh. You know what? We're in and we're running. And that's off 1.2 volt Eneloops. Again, I've noticed that weird issue where it and again, that's really tight. Again, I've noticed that issue where it resets an extra time on a Pocket. But then it's fine, so I don't get that. But yeah, even with alkalines in there, put in the EverDrive. Again, it's a tight fit. Tight fit on the Pocket. And the batteries didn't make a... Oh, geez. You know, I can already tell what I did. Who noticed that? Put that battery in backwards. Who caught that? Let's try that again. There we go. So it's booting up Nintendo. It should go right to the EverDrive, but it resets again. Again, very common thing on the Pocket. Any Pockets that's modified, I've had that issue with, even just a straight backlight mod. But again, if we hit start to play Battletoads, which we just flashed last, and there we go. We're in Battletoads. So it seems to be doable. A flash cart seems to be doable. Again, it's a little weird that it resets that extra boot cycle thing, but again, even my backlit Pockets do that. So yeah, it's doable. Again, bit of a tight fit for whatever reason. My EverDrive is a tight fit in some Game Boys. A stock Game Boy, a stock DMG, it's not. A stock Color, it's not. I think in some Pockets it is. But as you can see there with a real cartridge, like a real cartridge is loose. So I showed that when I showed off this EverDrive. It's clearly just a little bit, you know, a fraction of a millimeter thicker than a real Game Boy cartridge. Yeah. Thing looks great. Works great. I really like the fact it has like so many color options and with really no extra soldering, because you don't need to get to start and select like on a Game Boy Color mod or LNR triggers like on a GBA mod. Everything's done through that one built-in touch sensor. We didn't need to use that extra touch sensor. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't understand why that's there. We didn't need to use it. But with just the built-in touch sensor, you can go through the 32 or 36 built-in colors. The fact, if you go too far, just give it a hold for a few seconds and it'll go back. And the fact that if you hold it a little bit longer, you get the built-in pixel modes, which is great. They don't even advertise that, by the way. And the fact that the stock contrast wheel without any modifications now acts as the brightness knob for the aftermarket backlit LCD is pretty cool. You can really fine-tune in the brightness exactly where you want it. Don't go too bright and try and keep the battery life up. But again, you're never going to get amazing battery life out of these. Again, 3.5 hours probably tops, and that's going to be with that brightness down fairly low. But yeah, all that said, again, most of these complaints are issues with the Game Boy Pocket in general, not issues with the mod. Again, 2 AAAs is just not a lot of capacity. To be running a system like this with a backlight mod or with an IPS mod in this case of 2 AAAs, you just don't expect much battery life, right? Again, some people will get the rechargeable lithium-ion kits. So, you know, if you really want to go all out on a Game Boy Pocket, to be honest, it's probably worth changing the voltage regulator, and it's probably worth doing one of those lithium-ion rechargeable battery pack mods. Normally, I'm not a big fan of those. On the Game Boy Color, I really don't think it's necessary. On the DMG, I really don't think it's necessary. You know, that thing goes 5-6 hours, even with an IPS mod. Even with an IPS screen and a DMG running off 4 AA batteries, it'll still go 5 or 6 hours. Again, most of these issues are just issues with the Pocket and the fact that it runs off 2 AAAs. But yeah, I'm super pleased with this thing. It looks amazing. Fitment of the shell is amazing. I really dig the way this thing looks. Again, I ordered this directly from AliExpress, the official Funny Playing store on AliExpress. Took about 2 weeks to arrive, and it arrived with a broken screen, which was very frustrating. But again, I just messaged them in the built-in, you know, AliExpress has their built-in messenger thing. Messaged the Funny Playing store, and they said, sorry, we're going to send you another screen right away. That took about another 2 weeks, a little bit over 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks on that replacement screen. It did take a little bit longer for that to come, but it did come. They sent a replacement screen free of charge, and so honestly, that kind of just is what it is. These things are very delicate. It's certainly possible that you could get a defective screen, but the fact that they just sent another one right away, that's pretty great. And yeah, this took about a little over 6 weeks. Again, a little over 4 weeks. But man, was it ever worth the wait.